coming up on this week's episode.
You keep talking about shadow work. What does shadow work mean?
What if the worst case scenario had to happen? Go down that road. You have to go down that road to get rid of the fear.
How we felt in this test will come back to us.
Lilith, pure yin energy. We love the dark side, bro. We love the dark side because what would we be if we did not have both yin and yang? We wouldn't even exist.
So welcome to our timeline, everybody. And if you're not in the timeline, I don't feel sorry. I have a passion for you.
It's lunacy. Lunacy is logic.
With Lilith and Dr. Charlier.
Okay, so we have lunacy and logic online, on air, and here with Dr. Charlier. Dr. Charlier, what do you have to say for yourself?
Welcome back, everybody. And we are now talking to Black Moon Lilith about astrology and what's going on in the astrology.
Well, I think the topic of the day is definitely Saturn in Pisces. I think we need to discuss Saturn in Pisces, especially because I lived through now where Saturn went retrograde exactly on my sun. And so it's when it goes direct now, it's going to go over my sun for the third and last time. And am I feeling it? Saturn is leaving no stone unturned. You know, if you look at the energies of Pisces and the Saturn in Pisces together with Neptune in Pisces, and then you take Pluto in Aquarius, Saturn in Pisces alone is the flow of the water through the body, right? And this, you can really say flow of fluid. So it involves like the lymphatic system and the blood system. But when you combine this with Pluto in, when you combine it with Pluto in Aquarius, there seems to be a concentration of blood flow that requires focus. So with Saturn in Pisces, I would imagine, this can be some kind of blockage. Either a blockage in blood flow or too little blood, too little fluids.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I've had a few patients coming in today and recently, and I think that's an overall general that there's a lot of blood deficiency going on with a lot of patients. I don't know. I think there's also the big trend of like not eating meat. That's been a big trend to a lot of people. And because of that, that's kind of really reduced the amount of blood being developed and made in people. Just because I think the big vegetarian movement, vegan movement is great, but a lot of times people are just doing that because they want to lose weight or be healthy, but not necessarily understand what is going on in their bodies. So I think that's very interesting because that then also shows up as this idea that you have more fluid stagnation because you're not actually generating fluids. We're not eating the right foods to support our bodies to create this fluid that needs to support itself. Especially after this really hot summer, I think a lot of people were sweating, and that caused a lot of like fluid depletion.
Well, and that's interesting because you've got Neptune in Pisces, so that's just like a whole lot of dampness right there. And yet you've got Saturn in Pisces, which is like yin deficiency.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
So
Well,
you're
no, not
talking about the case of
necessarily.
diabetes.
Sorry. It's yin deficiency, but it could be yang deficiency because Saturn is cold.
Yeah.
So, maybe yang deficiency, you've left the cold and then the fluid builds up.
Well, so this is where I'm thinking like Saturn could be more also the foundational fluids. So yeah, there is some yin
For sure.
deficiency, similar to kind of what we
Maybe
call
not
Xiaoke.
foundational, I would more say is like fourth house. Whereas Saturn, I would more say it's kind of foundational, but you would say structural.
Yeah. So that's what I was saying is because Neptune is more like I think more like the lymphatic system, right? The fluids, lymphatic system.
Exactly.
And so what we're saying is, and we see this commonly, at least here in Houston, is when we run into people who are deficiently yin, so you get a lot of the dry mouth, thirsty a lot, and we see this often with like a diabetes type 2, where they are running out of fluids internally, but what's happening is they're getting an overabundance of fluid in their muscle layer, in their skin layer, causing something like a water, what's it called? Edema, right? So water retention in the skin layer in the body. And so that's an overabundance of water, which is like this whole Neptune in Pisces, which allows us to connect more deeply with each other. But that water should be internalized, not in the outer layer of the muscle layer, causing this edema.
Thing is, Saturn in Pisces, I would definitely say it stands for low immunity, because because Saturn is immunity, and Pisces is immunity, and Saturn is restricting that. So I would say this would be a very, very good time to be building up one's immunity, eating foods that boost immunity.
Yeah. So this is kind of where we go about in Chinese medicine. We're moving into the fall season. The fall season is connected to metal, and so we connect it to actually supporting the lungs. And so the lungs is actually very important in our immune system in traditional Chinese medicine, because the lungs are connected to the skin. And so in that breathing in and out, you're actually creating that natural low tide, high
Lungs
tide
are
of
almost
our
like the
fluids
first
in our
line of
body.
defense.
Exactly. And so the skin is very important in allowing it to be, if it's moist and it's supple, right? It has viscosity and has like flexibility, then that skin is able to actually protect it from the outside environment. It's when the fluids become bare that the skin becomes dry and it's able to crack. And that's when you allow the immune system to be so hard that it starts to crack and allow things to come into the system. And so this is why we often see a lot of people during the fall season, right at mid season of the fall, probably in the next month or two. A lot of people are getting sick. A lot of people are getting cold because their immunity is getting weaker, because they're not supporting the fluids that they need to support the skin layer. And so what's happening is a lot of cold is entering our body, causing these flu-like symptoms. And that's why a lot of times we experience these flu-like symptoms in our clinic. This is why we do a lot, if you guys know this, but we do a lot of cupping during this time when it starts to get really cold and people don't realize it's cold enough. And so for Houston too, there's these weeks where like it's really warm and hot and muggy, and then one week it's cold and dry, and suddenly like everyone comes in, they have their sinuses are like overreacting, they're getting stiff necks, is because the cold kind of snuck in for one week, and then the next week it's all hot and warm again, and everybody's out and about wearing shorts, wearing very low cut clothing because they think it's hot again. So what's happening is really the immune system is unable to address this hot cold symptoms, and so we get a lot of people coming in with like cold like flu symptoms during the season. In this kind of huge revolution of leadership, we are being asked to actually discern and connect to our beliefs rather than the belief of an outside society, outside construct that make us do things that we don't and are not meant to do. And so in the healing process, we're going to have to heal a lot of the social conditioning, but also guide people into becoming the best version of themselves, right? So like for astrology, I use that a lot to kind of get people to get back onto their own path, right? To see that, hey, you were born to be this. So the question is, why aren't you living your natural code, right? And that's why we talk about astrology constantly, because we do believe astrology is a way that in this awakening, people are going to be able to tap into who they are meant to be. And that's going to then give them an opportunity to develop their own leadership qualities for their own personal life, rather than to think, hey, I'm going to vote someone to tell me how to live my life.
No, exactly. And it's interesting because Saturn in Pisces has got to do with, Saturn is the planet of boundaries, and Pisces has no boundaries. So you can see there just that. You're not even talking now Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, but that very struggle over there between that boundaries and non-boundary structure I definitely think is at a peak right now with Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn. But of course, it'll still carry on as long as Saturn's in Pisces. That little struggle. But
Yeah.
I've definitely in my own life, with like since the eclipses, noticed transgressions of boundaries in my own life, and almost like multiple boundaries being transgressed at the same time. And it was weird because they could only be transgressed in that combination. It's so weird, like how it all comes together and then those boundaries are transgressed, and it really opens up my eyes to, this being conjunct my sun, to what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior is the one thing. Like how you can appropriately or inappropriately conduct yourself. Yeah, and I feel like that lesson is required for the future somehow. You're learning it
Yeah.
now or you're not learning it.
Right.
Like now was the last time to learn it. The next time it may not be as good. But it's tough to say because, you know, when certain events are supposed to happen and open up your eyes, they're almost fated, and in many instances they can be protected from the outside world. In other words, it can just be something that you know. It's just scary because a lot of the times this happens through dark events in our lives, and so you don't really, want it all out there.
Yeah.
As the light is as yang energy, as we move more from yin into yang energy, which is moving from darkness into the light, these things get exposed. Um, and I don't think I can tell yet, whether my darkness is the type of darkness that should get exposed by the light, or if it's just part of my journey and I can learn from it in my own private mental sphere and move forward with life. You see what I'm saying? Because yeah, it's tough. I guess the deciding factor would be, whether other people are being harmed in the situation. No, I don't believe other people are being harmed in the situation, but because they don't know about it.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
as soon as they know about it, they will probably be harmed by the information. So I guess it makes me scared then that that will be revealed, about me, and then that's Black Moon Lilith is then revealing a fear, and the very fear itself shows me that something is not right in that scenario. You see what I'm saying? And that you need to maybe move away from it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Saturn in Pisces is deep, y'all. It's deep.
Yeah, but that's also why, like, I think the retrograde in Saturn is kind of this level of
The
discerning
Mercury
what works.
retrograde in Saturn. What?
Are we having a retrograde too? A Mercury retrograde?
Uh, I don't believe we're in a Mercury retrograde now. No.
No. I do think there's a lot more this deep rooted emotional presence that we have not been allowing to come up. And I think Saturn is kind of like telling us, hey, we got to express these deeper emotions that we're not expressing. Otherwise, I think the torrential energy of that Piscean energy is going to really overwhelm people if they're not really healing a lot of their like emotional suppression.
No, for me it was more like fear suppression. I'm still working through those. But I mean that Saturn in Pisces, it can definitely help you work through these things in such a way that you get closer to God. I mean, I definitely think, certainly for the Pisces out there, the you've got about 15 years now for Pluto in Aquarius to basically prepare for when Pluto hits Pisces. And I think this period of Saturn in Pisces is really the kickstart of the Pisces preparing for when Pluto enters their sign.
Yeah, yeah.
I always look to my one astrologer. I call him Sensei, Christopher Witecki. I always look to him to judge like my current life circumstances. So like with these eclipses and the fiasco of my life and the shame and the guilt from past life karma, I mean, really, when all of this was going on, and I mean, I had failed some tests, bro. I failed some tests. God gave me those tests. I failed them. And I was devastated and filled with shame and guilt, all this past life karma. Then I hear Sensei Christopher Witeki, bro. He comes on in the morning and he sounds depleted, bro. His energy is down. This oak sounds as if life has just beat him to a pulp. And he says, he's like, I failed some of the tests, whatever. And then I was like, oh my word, thank goodness. If he's failing tests and I'm failing tests, then it should be okay for everybody to be failing tests. Because if we're failing it, who's capable of passing it? You know what I'm saying?
But that's also why it's important for us in astrology to understand retrogrades and cycles, right? Because as much as we think that we may have failed, whatever, we learned a lot of lessons. However, how we felt in this test will come back to us, whether it comes back in 5 years, 10 years, or less than 2 years, 3 years, because these retrogrades, these cycles come back to allow us to kind of go, hey, remember that test you took and you said you failed? Well, what would you do different to pass that test? And here's the energies that are coming back around again, so that that test that you failed, maybe this time around, you've gained enough experience to pass the test.
Well, this is what I'm hoping is going to happen in the future. So I'm hoping like this was the last time we were given to learn the lesson, because I learned it and I did that analysis like, okay, what would I do in future to avoid this from happening? And I thought about it. And so I don't know how I'm going to execute that just yet. I don't know how it's going to play out. But I'm thinking that I think I know what needs to be done to not go down that karmic path again. And hopefully when the time comes, uh, I will do as I'm supposed to. Let me tell you, Lilith, pure yin energy. We love the dark side, bro. We love the dark side because what would we be if we did not have both yin and yang? We wouldn't even exist. Not in 3D anyway.
Exactly.
So, so yeah, what to say? I am definitely, I find myself more and more learning to love my shadow side. And, as the fears come up, to work through the fears and to love that dark side. Get rid of the fears by, how do I get rid of the fears? So I generally get rid of the fears by, going down that road. Like, what if the worst case scenario had to happen? Go down that road. You have to go down that road to get rid of the fear. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
almost like you don't plan it, but you are just making sure you're prepared. That's more how you look at it, right? It's not like you're planning for the worst. But you are just preparing for all eventualities. And so you go down the road of the absolute worst case scenario and what you would do in that instance, and you've got to face it. And then you've got the next step is to get yourself to a place where that whatever consequence that is of the worst case scenario, that it's not that bad, that you'll survive it. You see what I'm saying? You'll survive it just like you get through every day. Shit happens, but you get through it. When you're physically present there, you get through it. Even things we feared in the past, when it eventually happens, we somehow get through it. Just in that moment, you've got the strength. So you think about how you can be better off, or how you can get through that moment the best, and then you take it from there. Because that for me is then facing the fear. And once you've seen that the fear is not really something to face, you'll get through it just fine. It almost instantly disappears.
Yeah, it's really interesting going to an event this weekend. This is kind of what I'm noticing, and especially being here in Houston compared to when I was in California with, LA, San Francisco. More people were more aware of the energies, collectively with astrology, or this idea that shadow work is important to kind of heal ourselves. And so in this past couple of weeks, I've really, being here in Houston, have felt that there's been a new wave of what we call this awakening groups of people who are waking up to their sovereignty, right? And a lot of times, what I run into is a lot of people will ask, you keep talking about shadow work. What does shadow work mean? And I think this is very exciting because as us as healers now who probably have been in this for a while, and some of us are much more new to being healers because we finally kind of deal with our own shadow work and we're starting to be asked to step up as healers. What's been really interesting is as we're being asked to step up as healers, we're then seeing a lot more people who are going through this awakening. And in this awakening, they are usually lost because I feel like a lot of times when people go into this awakening, you realize that like there's so much more to reality than just the 3D concept of physical reality. And so what happened is people get overwhelmed by the many things that they can do. And shadow work is commonly asked because no one talks about shadow work unless you're in the spiritual community. If you're in the non-spiritual community, they call it go see a therapist, right? And we don't really talk about what the therapist talks to you about, but we never kind of call the entire experience shadow work. We just go, you need to talk to a therapist to kind of deal with your emotional, psychological issues. And so what's really been interesting is we've seen this kind of like resurgence of people showing up now in these spiritual groups, and they are asking the much simpler stuff like, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I feel like I was driven to the medical physical space, but now like, what do I do? Do I do crystals? Do I do astrology? Do I do gene keys? There's just so many different paths. And that's what's really exciting for us, a lot of us as healers now today. We are kind of experiencing this new wave of people kind of waking up and finding ways to tune into their own spiritual mission. And that's been really exciting to kind of support everybody in that sense because, you know, this is why there's different levels of people waking up, right? If all of us woke up all at once, it'd be a crazy shit show. This is why you've had the 2012 group of people. You're now seeing the 2020 group of people. And they went through COVID, so they had a little bit of like time to kind of reflect on their life,
But
and
let
now
me
they're
just tell you,
coming out.
Saturn in Pisces is also isolating. I was going to say that earlier. It's also an
Yeah,
isolating energy for self-reflection.
right, right. But only for
And with
those who
Jupiter in
haven't done the work,
Gemini,
right?
those two mixed right there is talking to God.
Yeah, so there's a collective of awakening through healing the trauma of the old, letting go things that no longer help us, right? And so in a way, collectively, we're being supported to kind of go through this wake up call. However, this is why I think it's this wake up is much more potent than that 2012 potency of wake ups because I think in that sense a lot of people who were ready to wake up and go through the journey went through it, and this is why like a lot, you know, a lot like the whole world didn't disappear, but when COVID happened the whole world went through this like collective self-reflection, going inward and like leaving the public facing space. So this time around I feel like a lot of people are going through this, going through things alone in their own home space, but a lot of us healers are being asked actually to show up in public, to show up in gathering people and supporting people, because those who are finally recognizing that there are new things to think about, to process, they are finding us out there and they don't have to feel so alone as if like they're going to go through this experience by themselves. Just like a lot of us went through it in the last 10 years and we felt so alone that like it became almost detrimental to some of us, but we're able to get past it. And so now I think collectively a lot of people are going through that, but they're not alone because a lot more people are going through this awakening that I've ever experienced. And I'm very hopeful on top of the fact that like in the background it feels like the world is ending.
Well, I did get a message at least from one of my channels that there would be no nuclear event. So I'll take that as a good sign.
Oh yeah, I agree. That is totally not on the docket for our timeline. y'all,
So
like if there was real nuclear war going on, it's an existential problem. The problem of the nuclear weapons is that they actually break spiritual particles on top of the physical particles, so it affects multiple timelines, affects the multiverse. It fucks up a lot of people's timelines, and that's why I believe that the ETs, the higher beings, came down and said, "Okay, you guys can't play with those toys anymore, because you are." It's basically giving a kid a gun. I mean, like that kid doesn't understand what that gun is, right? So to them, it's like, "Oh, look, I can poke holes in the wall with this," not realizing you can poke holes in humans with that too, right? So I
yeah,
do believe that there is going to be no nuclear holocaust. So don't go into that space. Mad Max is not real. It's not going to happen. I think the only way we're going to ever materialize a Mad Max scenario is if all of us started to manifest and believe in a Mad Max scenario, which I think that many of us are not believing in that reality anymore. We don't live in a dystopian future Armageddon. I think we're living now already in the Armageddon. We're living in the new world already, right? Like even people's thoughts have changed, but we don't need to experience no food, people dying everywhere, and people eating each other. I don't think that we're gonna move to that timeline at all.
well, the timeline is there, but you and I aren't going, Dr. Charlie.
Right. Exactly. We're totally anchored in this one. Growing.
If you're watching this now, that means you're on the timeline with me and Dr. Charlie.
Yes. Yes. Yes, we're in the dark are finally falling apart, and the regular people, and I don't even want to say the good people, just regular home folks, people are finally kind of waking up to their own powers. So that's very exciting to see. So welcome to our timeline, everybody. And if you're not in the timeline, I don't feel sorry. I have a passion for
Welcome to our timeline. Exactly, Dr. Charlie. This is your and my timeline, bro.
Yes, and we'll have many what's it called? Mandala effects in this timeline just because we jumped from some fucked up timelines and we're now back in the fun timelines where shit's going well. And we're gonna see ET soon, and our spirit guides are here with us. I
Pluto
mean,
in
that's the
Aquarius.
timeline I'm on. Yes. Yes. It's a very fun time to be alive, y'all. I think it's a very exciting. As much as people think the world feels like it's in a very bad situation. I think it's just the darkest night before the brightest daylight.
And it is a dark night because that's the other thing. Saturn in Pisces is depression and anxiety. This is going to, I mean, it's at a peak right now. I think it will start to lighten after Saturn goes direct, but it will really still be felt until December, and then that the pressure of that Saturn in Pisces with Pluto at that 29 degrees Capricorn will dissipate a little bit. But I myself can't wait until Neptune at 29 degrees again. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, this Neptune. How long is Neptune gonna be there for? I'm actually just going through
No,
my
but
astrology chart over here to see. Oh, it goes direct come December. Okay, that's right. So December is when Neptune starts going direct
yeah,
again.
but
So that's where I
I
feel like
mean,
the
what
energy.
Neptune is at 27 degrees now.
Yeah, so it still has to go through 3 more degrees before it leaves. So,
No,
but
but I
I
don't
think
want Neptune to
y'all
leave
know.
Pisces. Neptune in Aries is not.
I know, I
uh,
know, I know.
You're not gonna
However,
this
we
Neptune
can't
in
stop the
Pisces
Neptune
of my
in.
12th house, bro. I'm gonna miss that energy so much, bro. I'm a little bit nervous for Neptune in Aries in my 12th house. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, that's why we have to enjoy it as much as we can. That Neptune in Pisces, and so
I'm gonna
27
take full
degrees is.
advantage.
Yeah, yeah. I think 27 degrees, and I've done this in starseed astrology. Starseed astrology just means the different levels of responsibilities that we as souls become connected to in our lifetime. So when it's the first 10 degrees of a sign, we're much more personal. When the first 20 degrees of then the next 20 degrees of our sign, we become more self mastery in our evolution. So we actually connect more and are being asked by source to work and do mission for maybe our brothers and sisters in our race or in our culture. And then when we move to the higher levels of like the 25 degrees to 27 27 degrees in a sign, you start to actually access the galactic codes, the galactic missions. And so this is where you, as a soul, has to represent your whole planet collectively to all the other outside civilizations are coming, like the ET races are coming down to support us, but we are being asked galactically to show up here on the planet as a planetary player. And so when we do see these 27 degrees, we are being asked fully to kind of go, hey, stop being the human who has issues with race and gender and sexism, and just be a human that's on the planet and ready to receive those other beings that are on other planets. And so we are able to exchange, right? Just like how America struggled in being able to bringing all the races and the ethnicities together in this country today, like it's, if anything, like we're now finally seeing the fusion of many cultures. But for the first, I think, 30 years of this country, maybe 50 years of this country, like we were fighting the cultures. The culture wars were separate. So I do think that with Neptune going to Pisces 27 degrees, I think our dreams, our idealism is going to be a lot more aligned to the mission of us becoming planetary players, planetary dreamers. That we're not here wishing that I wish all my races would come together, but more like I know my races are coming together because of the ETs that are coming soon. We're going to be ready to welcome them with open arms, because we'll be able to handle now beings that have bird faces, lion faces, alligator faces. Like that to me is the great evolution of this like Piscean energy. And so I think right now we are kind of going through a lot of healing internally, so that we are getting ready for making open contact. And I think that's why this 27 degrees Pisces is making us go way higher spiritually, because we are still stuck in like fundamental prejudice of our physical abilities and physical traits.
Well, I mean, I just love the fact that, I mean, you were saying about the 2020 wake up being more intense than the 2012 one. I think that evidence of the fact that all those people needed that isolation and that time for self-reflection just to like comprehend everything that's happening inside of them. I know I needed that specifically. I'm actually, with Saturn in Pisces and retrograding on my sun, still very much isolated. I feel like I'm on my own deserted island over here. And then, you know, with Neptune in the final degrees of Pisces in the 12th house, I've just got water as far as the eye can see,
That's right.
which I love. But it's still, the point is, it's still a very isolated, self-reflective time, my side. Yeah, it's been,
And we only say this because that's, you know, certain signs are particularly poised to be isolated at this time versus not everybody. And that's why I think it's very important to not what I call going to spiritual envy. I think a lot of us, when we wake up, we start to go, oh wow, that guy is so cool, he does this. That woman is so cool because she does that. They're also psychic. I wish I was too. You are. Going through the awakening means that you realize you are a psychic being who is accessing source constantly, but you have been turning off that spiritual voice within. And I think this awakening allows people to kind of like tune in and vibe up to this spiritual voice that has been speaking through us, but we have been kind of shutting it down, suppressing that energy.
well, it's interesting that Neptune runs through Pisces ahead of Saturn, because Neptune is like that connection to the divine, and then Saturn comes in and materializes everything. So, I mean, I have, God has been speaking to me and revealing new information to me, like shocking revelations. No, but I'm talking about specific stuff like the history of my family, like, and things that have happened that, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Like revealing, this is now, I think it started when either Mercury or Venus entered Scorpio. Yeah, by the eclipses, like in the middle of all of this energy. Like, yes, I just am shocked. You know, that's usually information I would see in an astrology chart. But the point was, I first got told that information, like a download, Then I went to the astrology chart and confirmed, when I looked at it, confirmed everything I had just been told. Saturn in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, right there. Right there.
Yeah, yeah. I think Pisces still has a lot more to offer. I think we still have a good 3 degrees in Pisces with Neptune, to kind of experience, what else this reality has to offer, what spirit has to offer. But I think is going to be more words of encouragement because, like you said, we are going
To
through
survive
Neptune in
Saturn.
Aries.
Neptune is going to give you words of encouragement because it's in its own sign, because of the upcoming Saturn
Yes,
transit. And you're going to have to remember
yes.
Neptune's words of encouragement to get through the Saturn transit.
Yes, because I don't know yet how Saturn will catch up to Neptune in Aries, but eventually they will conjunct in Aries, and that's definitely going to kind of step things up a little bit.
And you know
I
who else
think
is going to be there?
who?
Chiron.
Yes, Chiron is in Aries right now. Not for a while. I mean, Neptune hitting
Remember,
Chiron, that's like 20
that
degrees.
is part of the alignment that's happening over the next few years. Remember, I said I
Yeah.
did my chart out like up until 2030. Those three meet in
Yes,
my
yeah.
chart, and they will meet pretty much in everybody's chart.
Yeah. So I have heard that the next 3 years most likely are going to be again very astrologically divine. We don't know yet in what scale that is, whether we're experiencing
Well,
amazing
the
things
scale
or
is
the end
Neptune meeting
of
Saturn
things.
meeting Chiron. Hello. And there's going to be a few
Yes.
instances where the moon joins them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Aries gets a bad rep often being the god of war. However, in a much more spiritual concept, this god of war only goes to war when we're not honoring our boundaries, our personal boundaries, and this is kind of what's happening too. Is in a world where we have been outsourcing our leadership to people who do not deserve it, our personal boundaries, like right now, like the inflation of food is a problem causing people not being able to eat. So like their personal boundaries is they just don't have enough food to eat because they can't afford it because of the cost of living. That is getting closer to the point where we're going to get angry enough to kind of rise up against that because we're so uncomfortable with our personal lives, which is food, right? So I do think that and obviously Uranus and Taurus has probably caused some of that, evolutionary aspects for that. But I think the Aries energy, I think, has been supporting kind of what's going on also with the North nodes in Aries and Libra. We are really tuning into who we are as people, and that's why right now it's a very important aspect of seeing people rise up and be themselves rather than being what we call a mind controlled sheep that's just listening to social conditioning of, being American, being Asian, being white, being a male, being a woman. Like there's so much social conditioning, y'all, of like what people think you should be if you want to be people pleasing. And I think this idea of the Aries nodes and everything going into Aries in the next coming years is forcing us to kind of like step up in our own identity, stop living by the conditionings that the outside world is putting on us. And I think those who have been doing the work of identity work, going through shadow work and releasing the conditionings that don't allow us
Well,
to
I
be
think that
ourselves
is primarily
are
being carried
probably.
by Chiron in Aries.
Yeah, yeah, but that's just the beginning, right? Because now you get Neptune, Saturn, and all these kind of conjuncting in that space. I think people who have not been doing the personal shadow work will be experiencing a lot more of the definition of sovereignty, right? And I say this because those who did not wake up during 2012, who chose to snooze the button for another 8 years, experienced 2020 as a very difficult time in their life. For me, 2020 was not difficult. If anything, I was actually my most happy
Yeah, I was
because I
living
had
the dream,
already
bro. I was
I
living
was
the
living the dream too. Yeah, yeah. I was going to school. I was already isolated. I already lost all the friends that were not in line with who I am. And so what happened is 2020 was like a small vacation for me because I had been doing all the deep shadow work that by 2020 when people were going through the crazy, Charlie, can you believe blah blah blah? I'm like, "No, I already am in this. I already why don't you wear a mask? Aren't you afraid people look at you weird when you wear a mask? Look, I'm Asian, living in a very, European country for a long time. Until now, in Texas, there's a lot more Asians, but I've already been looked at as weird. So when people didn't see me wearing a mask and they were judging me, I was like, dude, I've been in this judging experience for like the last 10 years, being the outlier, leaving corporate, leaving social conditionings and living my own life. And people thinking that I have gone on the deep end because I wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. So 2020 is very intense for a lot of people who experience it, but a lot of us who have been in it understand that Source has been prepping us to tell us, hey, wake up earlier if you want to, so you can help those who are going to wake up at 2020. Just like right now, anyone who wakes up at 2020, if we did not wake up the entire rest of the planet, maybe in like 2026, yeah, I think 2026, there is going to be another evolution of us making contact with ET. So I do think that there is another, like, again, if you did not pass your test in 2020 and you went back to, like, I got a corporate job, I'm working fine, living and just living a 3D life, come the next, the next big planetary wake up call, you won't be able to disregard it. If anything, you will become an outlier if you didn't choose to believe in your own powers and connecting to source yourself.
I mean, it's an exciting time to be doing shadow work, because I don't think there's been such a time where shadow work is so instantly rewarded. That's that Neptune being
Yeah.
followed by Saturn in Pisces, like the materialization of that spiritual work. So I think while Neptune is traveling through Pisces,
Yeah.
ahead of that Neptune conjunct Chiron conjunct Saturn in Aries, discipline in spiritual work will definitely stand in good stead to be able to cruise easier through that alignment, which feels to me a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, and speaking of that, let's share some of the things that we are doing to ritualize our spiritual practice. For me, I wake up every morning. I wake up and go into my own meditation. I activate my chakras. I link up my spinal fluids, my spinal cord, and really kind of activate myself. I'm very grateful of the experience and to be alive, right? And that's kind of, I wake up to be more in a grateful space versus when I go to sleep. I review what I went through during the day, and I am grateful for the experience that I had. Things that I didn't like or things that I liked, I kind of like share as if like I'm speaking to Source itself and saying, "Hey, Source, really love this today. Really didn't like this today. Can I get some insight on this, or I want more of this in my life?" And what happens is you're basically triggering your own connection to manifest or attract these timelines to you. So when you go to sleep, you are then seeding your subconsciousness to actually do more of this. So when you wake up, you are finding a better timeline, and that timeline attracts what you were grateful for in your meditations. And so that's one way I practice my spirituality a lot more every day compared to before. I wasn't doing my morning meditations and prayers and in evening as well. So it was more like I was flying by how things were happening. But now that I'm being very conscious of how I am seeding my own timelines, my own frame of mind, so that I go right into that frame of mind in the morning, rather go into a lack mentality, which I've grown up and been in for a long time because we are immigrants, Asian immigrants of this country. And so a lot of times we experience very harsh times that we didn't have anything. And I kept identifying with those conditions. So now that I am choosing not to follow those conditions and choosing to create my own reality, I am creating habits to support my spiritual expansion. And so that's what it means to actually talk about a Saturn retrograding Pisces is what are the habits and the small things that you're doing every day that allows you to build your spiritual energy so that you are getting closer to understanding that you are one and the same with Source itself.
So, I mean, as a Pisces, with all of these energies, Saturn in Pisces, and like you said, getting a handle of those little details, which Pisces can do if they want to do, because they've got that opposite Virgo energy. But in the morning when I wake up, so one of the main parts of my spiritual journey is I'm a member of Sirius Joy, which is service by Sensei Christopher Witecki. And so he gives you like the astrological lowdown, so to speak, every day. So it's a daily thing. Um, and then I will also listen to what they call the sound drop. So this is a sound healing session where you do some breath work. We do chakra clearing, a sound bath, and a prayer. So that's like my basic morning ritual. Then during my shower, I'll also do mantras based on the astrological energies of the day. So I can only see like on the day. And I also consult astrology personally for my day to day. I will also consult a Vedic astrology app just to determine the favorable energies for today, if there's anything I should focus on, anything I don't have to focus on. And I would say those are the main aspects. The thing is, I have these little structural elements that go within my day, but I be sure to still, love the Pisces side of me and give me the freedom to do those things whenever during the day. Sometimes I may not do it like, for me, the proper time is to do it as soon as I wake up, but sometimes I might do it at night. If something happened and I had to wake up and take care of something immediately. So the freedom to have a structural routine, Saturn in Pisces, and have those things that you do every day, but you can also give yourself freedom as to when and how you do them every day. Because I definitely take into account astrological energies on the day. Sometimes I don't have a lot of advance notice with these particular energies. I get that information maybe 24 hours in advance. So I want to be flexible enough to be able to take into account the energies of the day and focus on tasks that are conducive to a more favorable outcome in those energies. At night,
Yeah.
I very much listen to either meditations or I let myself go wild and I do a little YouTube binge. If I've worked hard during the day, I bless myself with a YouTube binge of whatever tickles my fancy. The Y-Files, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it's very important for all of us to really focus on some kind of spiritual habits or spiritual foundation that really help us expand ourselves, connect ourselves deeper. I think nature walks is a big one. I want to actually
Oh
bring
yes, I
in
forgot
more
my
of my
exercise routine.
connection to nature. Yeah, yeah. Exercise routine is a big one. What's your exercise
I
routine?
also exercise usually after my prayers. Saturn
Okay.
in Pisces is very much more. We've got these energies now where you want to do a little bit less cardio and more like body weight training to build the structure of your body. And jump rope is also good for while Saturn is in Pisces to get the fluids moving. So, well, I do jump rope, jumping in whatever form. I use jump rope to jump, but in whichever way you want to jump, also helps the fluids flow through the body more easily.
Yeah, a lot of people call it rebounding. So some people have those little mini trampolines to allow their bodies to move this water in qigong, and this is what I'm teaching right now in one of my intro to TCM classes at school. Is we're including Tai Chi and Qigong because we're trying to teach people that actually energy is moving in your body, and you have to then use your physical conditioning to move that energy because not everybody is able to sit here and imagine the blood flow go to their hands. But if you move your hand, the blood flow is naturally moving and you're practicing both consciousness of energy and physical movement of energy. And so right now it's a very good time to be able to feel the energy in your body moving. And so in rebounding or in jumping, what you're doing, especially if you're a water sign and you have a water rising body, I would say it's very important to do more movement meditation like rebounding too, because what you're doing is forcing liquids to actually flow in your body if you're living a sedentary life. If you're not living sedentary, that's fine, but then are you moving around? Let's say like you work at Amazon and you're moving around all day long, you're kind of moving your body in a stressful manner versus if you're choosing to have like let's say a 20-minute run, after you've done your meditation. That 20-minute run is not done under duress or stress because you have to do it for a job, but you're doing it because you want to go into a meditation. And in that 20 minutes, your body is actually trying to zone out of your mind and send energy into the body. And that's why it's important to do that little jumping motion because you are moving fluids, whether it's blood or whether it's lymphatic. And so, like air signs always do that versus earth signs or fire signs.
I mean, you were speaking about qigong and tai chi. These are, and even
Yeah.
yoga. So and dancing. So Pisces is very fluid
Yeah.
movement. Okay, and so this
Right.
is like, like you were saying, tai chi, the movement, the qigong, yoga, even like that. You almost do them in a fluid movement, like a dance, like a graceful dance movement.
Yes. Right.
And applying discipline, Saturn, to those forms of exercise can also be highly, highly beneficial to Saturn in Pisces. And remember, Aries, I mean, even if it's not your rising sign, it represents by nature the physical body. So you've got this conjunction coming with Neptune, Chiron, the planet that signifies healing is needed, and Saturn, the planet that can bring with it illness. I would say, focusing on these kinds of things to harness that Saturn in Pisces energy will help with those energies later on. Once again, so this even uh, flows through to the physical movement. Previously, we were talking in other areas of your life, but this is how you think of astrology. I mean, that one planet impacts so many things, like so many areas of your life, right? Now we're talking about physical movement, how you can use it for physical movement. But so definitely showing some kind of discipline in those sections, which are, that's what Pisces does. Pisces likes to fuse fitness and spirituality, which is exactly what yoga, tai chi, qigong, what those kinds of things does. So it's perfect.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, and also why these modalities are much more, if you say, yin focused, and that's why because we're moving into yin focused time when the energies move into Aries again, we're probably gonna go into explosive physical activities, possibly where we're gonna experience much more. I probably will predict that during the time of all the crazy things going into Aries, we might experience more of a new kind of sports that gets people out and about doing stuff together that's much more fiery type of energy versus right now we're experiencing a lot more of this liquid movement, this watery movement, this healing movement, and that's why it's connected to shadow work versus when we go into the fire sign it's probably going to about like facing shadows, and so facing like by like yelling and screaming and being very active,
Mars is
energetic
about
versus
to
right now
oppose
it's a much
Pluto.
more. Yeah. Yeah, but Mars is in Cancer.
Yeah, these energies are lasting actually 7 months. They should normally last 2 weeks. These energies are lasting 7 months.
Yeah. Yeah, this Mars opposition I think is really interesting because we're going back to this idea that it's Capricorn Cancer um
Axis, yeah.
axis.
Shit is
And
getting bad.
Capricorn Cancer represents the working father and the stay-at-home mother. It's very important because what we've been talking about is this idea of the corporate world, where the corporate world is ruling the space, but also the mother energy was removed from the home space. And so what's really interesting is Mars, a masculine energy going into Cancer, the energy of the mother, is kind of
Oh,
telling us to
Mars is
take
fighting
action
for
in.
the people. Mars is fighting
Right.
for the people.
And so I do think that there is a resurgence of actually giving back more honor to the energy that is the nurturing energy of the mother. And so if anything, I feel like in this kind of battle between Pluto in Capricorn, ending the cycle of corporation, ending the cycle of power structure and really pyramid schemes, that really ruined the working man and being basically the man working for another man, right? This whole Burning Man world, and how we're kind of ending the corporate structure and this hierarchy of power, and that is kind of going through the end of it. And on the opposite end, we're seeing Mars, the energy of literally the war, the god of war, going into the Cancer energy of the motherhood. And I think this is kind of like saying, hey, we need to stand up for what it is to be a mother and give it back the honor that it deserves, because the mother is a very powerful being that is at home taking care of children to raise them to be better humans. Because unfortunately, education, civic duties, and the government did not create better humans. If anything, we've made spoiled, entitled, rich, and money hungry beings, and that's why we're in this Capricorn, system that we all kind of like. Hey, none of us like this system. So I think it's very important for us to recognize that the axis of the working father and the stay-at-home mother is kind of being reintroduced again. They're going to be an evolution of that, because I'm sure that many women were meant to be actually working versus some men were meant to be at home fathers. And so I do think that the evolution of what it is to be at home taking care of children versus the one going out into the world is going through this huge evolution, but right now is going to go head to head with each other. So I do think that we're going to experience kind of like these the problems
Well,
of not having parents at home
it's
and
also
having
interesting
both
that
parents working.
you kind of brought this ultimate male and ultimate female energy in competition, because that's really Trump versus Kamala, whatever, however you say her name, Harris. Trump versus Harris. I
Yes,
mean,
yes. Yeah. Well, actually, I believe it's beyond Trump and Harris. Actually, representing what we call the conservative hand and the liberal hand, right? And the problem with this is, so what we talk
no,
about a
but
lot
just the fact that
is
he's
the
male and she's female, that
I right, right. But also on
Capricorn
top of
Cancer
that,
energy.
yeah, and it's reflecting itself in the parties they represent, right? The conservative, red, Republican group has always been the representation of the the what we call the American dream of like the father works, the mother stays at home, takes care of the kids, and that's that conservative base, right? The liberal base is the one that says, hey, women can work too and choose not to be mothers and not to have children. And then that also says in that own space, men can be women too. And so what's happening is they're having
No, you
the
can't bring that
conversation.
into it. You can't bring
No,
that
but
into
that's a
it,
very
because not
important point that
everybody
they're
that
trying to
believes
make
what
on
you
both
just said
sides.
on that side believes that men can be women. I mean, that is such a small
I
majority.
understand that,
I mean,
but what I'm
small
trying to say is
minority.
they are
So they
pushing
can't
that point
be.
of view. Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's the polarities are pushing both sides. And so the problem is if we keep paying attention to the polarity, we're missing out the fact that there could be an evolution in the middle ground of that, right? So what I'm saying is the problem is we have these two polarized ideas versus what it's trying to say. Stop polarizing. It's actually in communion with each other where, we should only have one parent going to work and one parent at home. But what's happened is it doesn't matter. Both parents are working and both parents are not
Yeah,
at
because
home.
that
And so
opposition shows an imbalance.
right, exactly. And so what I'm saying is that polarity is showing up in what's happening literally in the conversation around these two groups. And that's what I'm saying. This is the problem is if we keep thinking these are two groups rather that it's one culture trying to find its balance, then we're going to keep getting stuck in this polarization. So, yes, I understand that like it's a very small group of people who believe that the left should be this way, but same thing with the right. Like not everybody believes that, only men should work and only women should be at home, but there's an evolution of that happening on the right on the Republican side too, where what they used to be was very Christian heavy, religious, dogmatic, people living in their little bubbles of like, we won't change anything that's happened in the last 200 years, right? But many of the people on the Democratic side said, hey, you guys are moving too fast on one way. We have to go back to like the basics of like, let's have a family. And those who had said like everything outside the family doesn't exist and everything's stupid, go, okay, maybe we need to adjust what the family's going through, which is allowing us to kind of go into that middle ground, right? And that's what I'm saying is I think the evolution of man and women should be astrologically, not gender based. And that's why we're running into the problem of today, saying all women should do this, all men should do that. But if we looked at it astrologically, actually, maybe half of the women who have strong masculine energy should possibly be the ones who work, and possibly the one they marry could be a man who has a lot of feminine traits. That could be the one staying at home, right? Or a version of these could be happening, but what's
Yeah,
happening
but I
is
mean, when he's staying
both
at home, he's still
polarities.
a man.
Right, I get that. And so we need to evolve what that means, right? He could be the man working and actually building shit at home and then selling it on the market, right? He could be a manufacturer, but he's, again, if he has like a Scorpio with like some Cancer, okay, I would say Scorpio, maybe with some fire, but like it's more of like the introverted builder. Yeah, that man may not necessarily be doing well in the outside world, but maybe he's building things at home and he's putting it on the market now, and he's able to support his family, but not necessarily be that typical man working in corporate and trying to like rip off everybody, right? See what I'm saying? Like there's still an opportunity for the man to still be manly, but in his own space, rather than having to go and like fight this battle in corporate world. I mean, this problem with corporate world is a lot of men became toxic men because money was more supported. Being like this cheater, playboy mentality with a lot of money. That was also that representation of the ego corporate, Capricorn. That needs to change too, right? So I'm saying is, I think in both sides, there's been too many polarities of the both the toxic and non-toxic version of that, and so this Mars opposition Pluto is representing us coming together and saying, how does this kind of not work, and how does this work again when we are choosing a new way of living together with our families,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I'm saying this opposition will actually bring up a lot of this. It's already been bringing up, and the election and the conversation of election has been bringing it up. But I think the Mars opposed Pluto is gonna make that way more active in people's consciousness.
These are intense times. Uh,
Yes.
my understanding is that these tests that are coming up, um, it's going to require you to let go of your pride. It's like an ego death. So it requires compromise and finding a way forward. If you're gonna get yourself into arguments and take that road, my understanding is that it's not going to end well for you. And my further understanding is that when Neptune and Saturn and Chiron meet in Aries, it's going to be even worse. Rather than if you just compromise now and let that let that ego die a little bit, um, and put your pride aside and put harmony before anything else.
Yeah, and so the suggestion and advice for everybody at this time is actually go tune in deeper into shadow work, or the things that you've been avoiding to deal with, or the things that you've been afraid to deal with, and face those, because we're coming into much tougher times where there won't be a lot of support in many ways, because we're being asked to face what reality really is, and because of that, because we'll be moved out of Pisces. So the idealism or hopeism or altruism will kind of go down a little bit, and we're going to be facing with like things that we haven't been dealing with. And so if we have done our shadow work, then the energies in Aries will be a lot more supportive of our identity. If you're not doing your shadow work right now, facing your own demons and your own issues that's not allowing you to grow, then I think the Aries time will feel very confrontational. Is gonna feel like you are fighting with many people, because the new reality, the new system is anchoring itself. And if you still believe that like money is power kind of mentality, then you're probably going to confront people who don't believe in that, and that may cause a lot of
Exactly.
um, fiery engagement. And so that's why we're saying, like, this is not telling you the future. This is telling you that if you do the energy that is present at this time and go into it more deeply, then when
And
the
more
energy
with
of
more
change
awareness.
happens, yes, 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 with spirit, because like where Pisces being here, that means spiritual energy. God herself, himself is here with us. And
Pisces
we're
be
having,
talking to God. Pisces be talking to God every day.
yes, yes. Exactly. And so if you're not talking to God, whatever version of God you connect with, then it's going to feel very lonely come the next following months because you haven't learned how to, call God, call a friend, that whole who wants to be a millionaire,
Yeah.
you have your lifelines and you want to have your spiritual lifelines during this time of major change in the world. Because I think what we're experiencing is the ideas of change. We haven't experienced the physical representation of that change. So that's why we tell you all the time, like, pay attention to what's happening now, because paying attention to what's happening now could support you. And when it does change, you are ready for that versus when it does change, you go, why? Why did this happen? And we said everybody in astrology was talking about how you should be doing inner work and shadow work the last 6 months, and you didn't listen to that. Sorry, but you are going to experience shadow work when it's really, really bad.
Well, I feel like Dr. Charlie and I are here to get you through the future on a bright and sunny note.
Yes, so let us wrap up with the show for today. Do you have any last thing you'd like to share?
Saturn in Pisces is only going to come around in another 30 years' time. For those Pisces over there that are overweight, now's the time to lose weight. It ain't going to be easy again until another 30 years' time. That's my word of advice.
Wait,
Word.
so you're saying the next couple of months is the best time to actually lose the extra weight?
Well, ever since Saturn really entered Pisces, but like for me now, Saturn is retrograding over Pisces. Like I need to, like, the next few months, yes, I need to be focusing on losing weight fast, because there's not going to be like the next time I have a window like that. And just keep in mind, I've just lived through Jupiter in Taurus in the second house and in the first house. So the first house I put on weight, and then the second house I overindulged in food, leading to more weight gain. So now Saturn in Pisces is coming to fix everything that Jupiter did with the overindulgence.
That's funny. That's funny. Is that why like the huge Ozempic push has been going on in the last couple of months?
Well, I've got a sun sign Saturn, so I think it's more relevant to
Yeah.
sun sign Saturns, maybe Pisces ascendants. But yeah, it's relevant to everybody, right? Because that's the natural
Yeah,
houses.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting. Okay, okay. I've definitely noticed that. So everybody, I mean, this is astrologically a good time to reduce, right? To kind of clean up your karmic line, but also to like
Exactly. It's a time of shedding.
yeah, it's a time of shedding. Saturn is great at reducing things that are over
Releasing.
excess and indulgence.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So we still have a few more. We still in retrograde in Saturn in Pisces, but again, a few more months into this, and you have an opportunity to really get into the best shape of your life to reduce the amount of extra water weight you might be carrying.
All
So
those
please,
Pisces out there. Woo! You can
yeah,
do
for all the
it.
Pisces out there or any inclination of Pisces, I'd say, Pisces in the first house, second house, possibly Pisces moon, maybe. um, but yeah, definitely tune into these energies right now at this time. We're very much in a very beautiful time for shadow work. Talk to your spirit guides, talk to your connection to spirit, but really a good time for us to shed the old and prepare to move into the next cycle of the planetary alignment. So thank you all for listening to astrology and the cosmic weather report with us. And stay tuned next week. We'll continue our astrology conversation.
Bye.
Please like this video, share it with your craziest friend and subscribe or follow for more of this madness.